Hi everyone, I wanted to show you this Teenage Grim Reaper doll that I made, and I wanted to show you what I've done to her so far. So in a previous video, if you remember, I was making some doll eyes and I made some black eyes with they had iridescent glitter mixed in with the resin that goes in the centre. So what I've done is I've attached those eyes to the doll using some hot glue. Basically what I did is I got the eyes and put two blobs of hot glue, one at the top of the eyeball and one at the bottom. Used that to hold the eyes in place. And then once I was satisfied with the position of the eyes, which was a fiddle, I tell you now, doing it on a head so small is a pain, but I got there in the end. Once I got the positioning how I wanted, then it was a case of filling all the inside of the front of the head with hot glue just to make sure those eyes aren't going anywhere. Then what I did, because the eyes had gone a little bit dull with me just messing with them and fiddling about with hot glue and repositioning the eyes, because it took a while, I then put couple more drops of resin on each eye just to bring the shine back, which worked really well actually. I think all I'd like to do in the future is next time I do the eyes is make them look a bit more rounded. I think the eyes came out a little bit flat, so it just means that next time I just need to shape the base of the eyeball a bit more to fit the precise doll that I'm working on, and then put a bit more a bit more resin in the centre where the iris of the eye is, because then that will make it a bit more of a dome shape. I've tried that with some other eyes I've had and they worked out a lot better with extra resin, so I think it was just not quite enough resin and the actual clay was a bit flat. I could have done a bit more of a dome shape, but that's fine. I've not made eyes for ages and I've only ever done it once before, so I was quite pleased with how they turned out considering. So the next part, once the resin had set and the head was dry, was I used a bit of acetone just to get off the little bit of stickiness on the head from where there's little drips of resin and stuff like that. Then it was a case of painting the doll's face white in all the areas where I wanted the shape of this skull bone to show through. Then once I'd painted all the white areas and got the basic skull shape that I wanted, luckily with this skeleton, because it's supposed to be a doll that's like a sugar skull with a sugar skull face, it's got that sort of really defined bone shape anyway, so that helps with getting the skull shape right. Once I'd done that, then it's a case of using black paint and filling in all the other areas. So between where the main skull bone and the lower jaw is, underneath the lower jaw, around the lower jaw, the temple areas, it was a case of filling in all those areas with black. I also filled around the eyes with black as well. You'll see at first they look a bit wonky and weird, but I do fix it later on. I was having trouble deciding on exactly what the shape I wanted for the eyes, because when I cut the eye holes out, I made them like normal eye shapes, and I decided I wanted to make the eye holes look a bit bigger, like the eye sockets. And as you can see as well, I'm painting around the rest of the head and the back of the head and everything. I am going to root her once she's fully dried, but I'm not going to do that in this video. What I'm going to do is I'll have that done for when I do the next video, which is her costume, because I couldn't do everything in one go for this video. The video was already over an hour long when I filmed it, just doing this part. So in order to make it so you haven't got to watch a video that's like about 3 hours long, I'm going to do the making her costume and everything in a separate video. So for now, this video is all about the actual painting process and creating the look of the doll. So as you can see, I went around with an extra layer of white paint. This is just to get rid of any streaks, because the first layer of paint was quite thin, because I apply the paint fairly thinly because I don't want to have big streaks in the paintwork and I want it quite smooth. So obviously I have to apply the paint in thin layers. So then it's a case of going over those white layers a few times. I did it about, I think I did 3 layers in the end, just to get a nice solid white colour. Just that gives me my starting point for the skull. And as you can see here, I've fixed the eye shape from the mess it was when I first did it. I just wanted to make them a little bit bigger, and then I added this sort of little curly thing in the corner. It was just like a stylistic choice. I just wanted something that looked a bit different, and I quite like how that looked, so that's what I did. It's one of them where like I start painting and I add little curly whirly bits and different shapes and stuff and just see what happens, and if I like it I keep it. Then I refined the shapes of the bones and things, just using the black to get rid of some of the white where I'd applied it a bit thickly or the ends were a bit blunt and I wanted to have nice thin tapered ends just to make it look better. Then it was a case of working on the mouth, which was a pain because of how small the mouth is. So what I did first of all is I put a black line through the centre of the lips, and then I did black lines where the gaps between the teeth would be, and that was like my basic sort of positioning and gave me the basic idea of where the teeth are going to go. And you'll see I'll refine that a bit later on once the paint's dried. And I added a bit of white paint in between those black marks, and that just defined where the teeth were a bit more, because I wanted the teeth to stand out. And I did a couple of layers of thicker paint for that, so then the teeth have got a bit more of a sort of 3D look to them, like they look a bit more, they stick out a bit more now. So it just gets rid of that shape of the lips a little bit. Then I went round touching up any areas where I'd got little streaks or little smudges of paint, anything like that, just to get that really nice base for me to work from. So here you can see I'm just refining the shape around the eyes and everything. And then after doing that, it was a case of mixing up a grey colour. Sorry, my paint palette's slightly off shot, but never mind. It's only black and white on my palette, if you're wondering. And I mixed a grey colour, and this is for my shading. And at first it looks a bit weird because it's like just solid lines of grey, but don't worry, I'll blend it in later on. So what I started off with was like a light grey colour, and I used this to go around the edges of the bone shapes that I'd created, underneath the eye socket, above the eye socket to add a bit of shading, and to the bridge of the nose. I also added the grey underneath, like at the bottom of where the jawbone is and everything. So basically everywhere where it's white, I outlined the whole thing in the grey, and then you'll see me later on blend that in. But for now, as you can see, I'm just applying that grey just to start working on the shading, just to make the bones look a little bit more 3D. And just, I don't know, it just looks better when you've got added shading at the end. I added a grey patch there on the forehead and then blended it in with my finger because I was going to shade that area a bit more, but I decided later on it looked weird, so I went over it again in white. Here I'm just applying the grey to the temple areas of the skull and the back bit of the cheekbone, and applying a bit around the eyes just to make the eyes look a bit more sunken in. And obviously while I'm working on this, I'm being careful not to get any paint on the resin eyes that I created. They are fine now, they have set, they're not sticky or anything, but obviously I didn't want to get paint on them because it could ruin the shine of them, and then trying to get it off would be a pain, because if I use anything to wash it off. It could make the resin go dull or cloudy. Here I'm using a light grey and I'm extending those black lines that I created for the teeth to make it look a bit more like you can see the roots of the teeth and make those teeth shapes a bit longer. So I went over the black and extended the black with the grey, and then later on I went over it with white again on where the teeth would be, just to make those teeth stand out a lot better. Now I was going to do shading with pastel, and as you can see it didn't stick. I probably should have done that while the paint was still a little damp or something, or apply, you know, I could have applied maybe a bit of a, not varnish, but like a fixative or something first, but never mind. In the end I just did it with an even lighter shade of grey. So what I did is I mixed a very light shade of grey that blended into the white really well, but it also blended into that grey, and just went over the grey areas, and especially made sure I went between where the grey met the white, just to make those shadows a little bit more subtle and just to blend them in. This gives you a sort of more curved bone shape, but without it being obvious painted on shadow lines, if you get what I mean. And I went over any areas I wanted to be nice and bright and to stand out with white, just to add highlights to the bones and just to define those shapes a bit more. And I went over any areas where I thought it was a bit weird. Sorry about the lighting. For some reason when I moved my hand, the camera was trying to pick up the lighting change and having a bit of a job. It's really dull at the minute. It's ever so funny because like the last few days have been like boiling and we've been melting in the UK, and now I've got a chance to film, it's gone cool and dull. So yeah, I don't think I'd got enough lighting when I was filming this, so that's why you see slight light variations when I move, but never mind. Then once I painted the face, it was time to work on the body. The body, I was just doing a very basic wash of black, just doing like a sort of antiquing effect. So what you do first of all is cover the entire body in black paint, front and back all over, and then you'll see afterwards I take a slightly damp baby wipe, like it's one that's quite dry, like it's almost dry but there's still a tiny touch of dampness to it, and I wipe that all over the body to make the bits of the bones, like the shapes of the bones, stand out more. It just adds a bit more definition to the skeleton, and also it makes it so it kind of matches the head a bit better, because obviously I'd got like a bright white and black head and then a sort of creamy coloured bony body. So as you can see, when I first start to wipe off the paint, not a lot's coming off because my baby wipe's quite dry, so I added a little bit of water, and as you can see, doing that, it wipes that surface layer of paint off the high areas and just makes all those nice recesses and shadows and shapes stand out a lot better on the body. If I wanted to, I could probably go over it with a little bit of, oh yeah, I smudged the face while doing that, which was clever, but that's all right, I can fix it. I'll probably go over some areas, maybe darken them again, I'm not sure, but that's it. Hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you for watching. Bye for now.